We now have a new catalyst that has just had a very, very positive impact on the market and could cause another shakeup here in 24 hours when the markets open. This whole thing is connected to Donald Trump. We have new purchases from Michael Saylor that we need to take a look at, Bitcoin purchases. We have Bill Miller, the investor worth $300 million, who is now saying, hey folks, there's something here that could push Bitcoin to new highs, and a BlackRock warning, which is already a bit older, about 2 or 3 weeks old, but has flared up again now. But first, let's smash that like button down below. We're seeing a slight uptick right now because of what's currently happening in the market today. Very, very positive movements. Hit that like button for me if you want the Bitcoin price to keep going up. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We actually have something new from Donald Trump that's moving the markets right now. U.S. Treasury Secretary Bazin has said that Trump will impose tariffs starting August 1st, equivalent to those from April 2nd, on countries that don't enter into trade agreements with the U.S. In other words, Trump has once again extended the tariff pause from July 9th to August 8th. And of course, the markets are reacting positively to this at first. Bitcoin immediately shot up to over 190,000 US dollars. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what happens when the US markets open. I think I just said 24 hours ago, but I realize now it's not actually that long anymore. We're not at 24 hours at all. There are only, well, if you look at it, maybe just 16 hours, 14 hours, 12 hours left, depending on when you're watching this video. And this could have an impact on the financial markets, on the classic, traditional financial markets, but more likely in a positive way. Then there's the second statement here, which actually assumes that currently, over 100 countries or smaller nations have not yet approached the US to finalize their trade agreements. In the meantime, the tariff pauses have effectively been extended by 3 weeks. The markets have been pricing this in for weeks, and that would suggest that there won't be any major reactions since the markets have already partially factored it in. But you will definitely see a slight positive reaction, and above all, in the medium term, this will of course move the markets very, very positively. Maybe it will also turn out that Donald Trump isn't actually as tough as he makes himself out to be, and that he often just sets certain anchors to be able to present his negotiating position very well, by making certain threats, but then continually pushing those threats further back. At some point, that might just stop being believable. That's why you have to be a bit careful here. I also saw a really interesting post here that shows why this is a massive price driver. We can see here that in 2020, Trump signed the $2.2 trillion CARES Act. That pushed Bitcoin up by 55% in 3 months. In December 2020, we had the $900 billion COVID package plus the $1.4 trillion omnibus. I don't even remember what kind of stimulus package this was. That made the altcoin market cap explode, up about 700% from Q1 to Q2 of 2021. And now in 2025, we have the big, beautiful bill here. A $3.3 trillion spending bill, maybe even higher, possibly 5 to 7 trillion. And you can really see the comparison here. Why so many people are so bullish right now? Because these are massive capital flows moving into Bitcoin, and they will clearly boost Bitcoin, if not absolutely have to boost it, right? And then we actually have Michael Saylor here, who's posting his orange dots again and saying, some weeks you just need to HODL. That means he'll be announcing his Bitcoin purchases again tomorrow. So we're really, really curious to see how much he's going to buy this time. Last week we also saw that he once again did some major ATMs, meaning stock dilutions. Because the thing is, he can mainly do these stock dilutions when Bitcoin prices are going up. In the past few weeks, he went several weeks without doing any significant stock dilutions. I've also said that I think it's a good thing that they're testing out other financial vehicles as well, like Strikes, Ride, and Strive, and are trying to push those forward. We also had some really wild discussions this weekend about the strategy, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, and so on. I still came to the conclusion that strategy definitely won't have any problems here, even in a bear market, because the financial products are structured so smartly by Saylor. He can, for example, suspend dividends at times, and he doesn't have to pay really high interest rates compared to other companies, which can't just suspend dividends so easily and aren't as flexible when it comes to repaying their obligations to shareholders. Michael Saylor is really the absolute OG here, and one thing has become even clearer to me, especially over the weekend, talking to all the Bitcoiners at the Electric Love Festival, that MicroStrategy will probably benefit the most from the whole treasury boom. There was always this discussion about whether strategy might experience some performance losses because other treasury companies might pull away some of MicroStrategy's or strategy's performance. But it really became clear to me again. No, strategy is truly the flagship here, and the other treasury companies will push everything forward. And yes, some treasury companies will also go bankrupt. There will also be treasury companies that go bust because they over-leverage themselves or for other reasons. But strategy will benefit massively from this. But of course, I'm always open if someone says, okay, they see this critically. Sure, there are certain centralizations, cash risks, and so on and so forth. But of course, Michael Saylor is a very, very smart person. And in my opinion, he hasn't made any major mistakes with strategy so far. not any significant ones. And my decision over the weekend was, hey, if he doesn't make any operational mistakes here, then he's going to steer this thing very, very well even through a bear market. But you never really know. People are people, and mistakes can happen. So everything here carries a certain risk. The lowest risk you can have is basically just Bitcoin itself. Get yourself a hardware wallet, keep it on your hardware wallet, and then you don't have to trust any exchange, any platform, not Saylor, not anyone. If you're still looking for the perfect hardware wallet, I'll put a link below to a TREZOR hardware wallet. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you'll even get a discount. It's an absolute recommendation. Everyone really needs a hardware wallet like this, and treasury companies shouldn't make up the majority of your portfolio either. At most, just a portion or a mix. There's basically no contradiction with self-custody here, because treasury companies are there to siphon off the 300 trillion in the bond market, while Bitcoin and self-custody is there to make you more sovereign. So, treasury companies are not in opposition to holding Bitcoin and self-custody. Some people really misunderstand that. No, the treasury companies want to tap into the 300 trillion bond markets here, and Bitcoin and self-custody is a completely different use case. And of course, those 300 trillion will also drive the price of Bitcoin up. If everything were to flow into Bitcoin here, which probably won't happen entirely, but maybe a large part of it will. And then there was actually another report that popped up. Yes, flared up. This time from BlackRock. US debt is growing 3 times faster than the gross domestic product, and interest payments now exceed defense spending. By 2030, every dollar of federal revenue could be used for social benefits in schools. Sorry, not for guilt. I actually meant for debt. So for social benefits and debt. That was actually the investor letter that Larry Fink put out here. I took another look at it. It wasn't a new report, but rather an old report that someone reposted here, and then it started making the rounds again. And that's something you really have to keep in mind. The debts, the new debt exchange from Donald Trump, and of course the whole tariff issue, which is still holding things back a bit, but could potentially ease off here as well. And then, basically, you can expect that the Bitcoin price will react very, very positively. And then there are also those unpredictable things that come into play as well. There's a really cool statement from Bill Miller here, and we're going to take a look at it. Bill Miller IV, that's who this is. He's a billionaire. I think his father is actually a billionaire, and he's a millionaire. Wait, what did I just say? He's a 300 times millionaire, so his fortune is 300 million. His father is a billionaire, and here he's talking about an effect, a catalyst, that a lot of people don't have on their radar. I've hinted before that this could be a massive catalyst, but here he explicitly talks about the perversity of this law that currently exists, and that it's really a no-brainer that this law will be abolished. And once that law is gone, there will be a lot of upside potential here for Bitcoin.
These Bitcoin guys fell at the wrong time, so that all needs to be worked out. So that's why I continue to say it's still early, because the taxation rules around it are really interesting. I do want to make an interesting point on taxation, though, because I've heard people complain, because Trump has floated the idea. I'm not sure why these Bitcoin guys pay taxes on there, whether that makes sense from a cap gains perspective. And people go, oh, that's regulatory capture. That's, this, that, and the other cronyism. Well, the reality is, if you think about why you pay taxes in society, it's to enforce property rights. Okay. And so the government, when you buy or sell a house, all that recordation tax, all those taxes go towards keeping track of who owns what. Well, number one, the government didn't create Bitcoin. So that's an important point to keep in mind. And number two, that the blockchain does that property automation for itself, right? And so the government doesn't need to do that. So for them to reach their hand in there, it doesn't make a ton of sense. Whether or not that ultimately happens or not, who knows? But it is very cool that there's still no wash sale rule on Bitcoin. So it's notable.
I'm not going to go on a tangent, but I think it's ridiculous that you buy a house and for the rest of your life that you live in it, you basically have to pay rent to the government. I mean, I just think that's something so wrong. Maybe for
And now you really have to realize just how absurd this system is. That means, he's saying here, okay, there are just classic assets where you pay certain taxes simply to enforce the property rights. So, for example, with real estate, you always have to keep track of the land register. Someone has to provide the police to enforce these rights. You have to make sure, okay, is the land defended? Are the streets safe? And so on. All that kind of stuff. And with Bitcoin, it's different, because property rights are enforced in a decentralized way by Bitcoin miners. We don't need a government for that. We don't need a state. We don't need the EU or anything like that. It all works completely automatically. So we have property rights that are independent of any state, and the states didn't create Bitcoin either. So why do states now claim the right to tax Bitcoin? They neither created it, nor do they have to maintain the whole thing, nor do they actually provide any meaningful service to the network. So they're just germs. They're just some kind of parasites, as Malay would say, who just want to take your money out of your pocket. And then Natalie Pinnell adds that even with real estate, it's absurd that you buy a house and then have to pay some kind of tax to the government just for living in your own home. But with real estate, it's a bit more understandable, Because real estate isn't decentralized, it's centralized. It needs an administrative structure, and so on. But on the other hand, yeah, why have an administrative structure if it's your property? Your property should never be taxed. That means, whether it's Bitcoin, real estate, whatever, property should really never be taxed. But with Bitcoin it makes even less sense. And now, pay attention. This is also the foundation for even higher Bitcoin prices. Because when this absurdity becomes clear to politicians as well, and I think more and more people are waking up, more and more people are realizing it. In the US, there are all these bills, all these procedures, all these attempts to get rid of capital gains tax, at least below 1,000 euros or below 10,000 euros. There have been various attempts at this. I think Donald Trump might actually be somewhat open to it. He also said he wants to make the US the Bitcoin and crypto hotspot, the crypto and Bitcoin capital or something like that. That means if he wants to do that and also wants to make the US the Bitcoin mining powerhouse, then he basically has to get rid of all that. He can't make Bitcoin the main thing here in the US. He said himself, Bitcoin is super important in the US, and Scott Fesson said it too. And if that's the case, then you can't tax Bitcoin so heavily here, or actually you can't tax it at all. Even if, for example, you want to make it a, or something like that, then you can't tax it here or anything. And that's just another absurdity that's in the system here. And if this absurdity were to end, it would of course bring a whole lot more capital into the market, because then Bitcoin could actually function as a means of payment. Right now, there are also people who say, yeah, it doesn't work as a means of payment. Yeah, of course, if I have to pay 20% tax when paying with one method and no tax with another, then obviously I'd rather use the payment method where I don't have to pay any tax. And that's basically the unfair system that still exists here at the moment. And I wouldn't recommend anyone to just go and commit tax evasion or anything like that. I always tell you, hey, look around, make yourself an account on coin tracking. There you can track your taxes. You can see which coins are tax-free and which aren't. How much tax do you have to pay? You can generate a tax report there, which you can then send to the tax office. You can get really cool feedback here. And you can track your portfolio on coin tracking. That's why it's an absolute recommendation to check out coin tracking. As long as we still have these crazy rules, where everything gets taxed here in Germany, in the USA, almost everywhere in the world, there are a few havens, like El Salvador and so on, where it's sometimes not taxed. But as long as we have taxation, you absolutely have to use these these tax tracking tools. I'll put a link for you below. Use code BTC Hotel, exactly, code BTC Hotel, then you'll get a discount. And you can also sign up for free at first. And then it's also important to think about being ready here, to be in the game when all the money bombs drop, and to have enough Bitcoin. I recommend checking out 21 Bitcoin for that. With the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin. I think I'm even wearing my 21 Bitcoin t-shirt right now. I think I put it on inside out. I don't think you can see it. Well, you can kind of see it, but hang on. Let me see if I can turn it around. Okay, now this is really touching. Now I'm completely turned around. Whatever, you know what I mean. Guys, check out 21. Check out 21 Bitcoin. See you. Catch you later. Peace out.